In this video, we're going to be looking at the structure of the vertebral column. Remember, two bones connected together make up a joint. So in my example right here, we've got two lumbar vertebrae that are connected by a band of cartilage. Now, so this is an example of a cartilaginous joint. The two bones being held together by cartilage. Now, these are not going to be very movable, and you got to remember why. In this model right here, you see an example here of a representation of the spinal cord. And remember, the spinal cord goes down this vertebral foramen. That's the opening from the vertebral arch on every single vertebrae. It makes a long column going on down. Now, off of this spinal cord, you're going to have these spinal nerves coming off, carrying information to and from the brain to the spinal cord. Now, the vertebral discs, like is shown right here, this is called the intervertebral disc. Intervertebral is between the vertebrae. Okay, here's a closer view of that model of the intervertebral disc. Now, this intervertebral disc acts like a shock absorber, where it sits between the vertebrae, so that the weight from one vertebrae to the next is distributed out. Now, the outside is made up of a material called fibrocartilage, and it's very, very tough, difficult to tear. Whereas the middle is called the nucleus pulposus. It's kind of jelly-like. So what happens then is right where this pin is, if pressure is applied down there, the soft middle part bulges out and presses against this ring of fibrocartilage. Now, if the fibrocartilage is nice and healthy, it contains it, so it doesn't push out. But as we get older, the fibrocartilage weakens. And when you do something stupid, like lift incorrectly or strain yourself in some way, this ring of fibrocartilage can tear, like in this representation here. Here, the ring of fibrocartilage was split right here. So the middle part, the nucleus pulposus, is pushing out straight and back. If this were going on inside your vertebral column, this would be pressing against the spinal cord. And when you put pressure on a nerve, if it doesn't fall asleep, and if you've ever had your arm or foot fall asleep, get that tingling sensation, that's basically pressure on the nerve. Extreme pressure like this could paralyze people. Now, if it doesn't push out the straight back like this one, it can push out to the side, like in this one. Again, here's the fibrocartilage. The nucleus pulposus is being pushed out, and now it's being pushed out sideways. If it pushes out sideways, it's going to press against a spinal nerve. And here's where the intervertebral disc will lie. And here's the spinal cord. So if we have damage to it that pushes straight back, hopefully you can see that this portion that bulges out is going to press against this very delicate spinal cord. If it pushes out the side, like with this one, it's going to push against this nerve. As it pushes against that nerve, it's going to cause pain and numbness, all the way through anything that would be attached to this nerve. Because a great deal of stability is necessary to protect the very delicate spinal cord, in this model here, another view of the spinal cord going down the vertebral foramen, the vertebrae are also fused together very tightly with these ligaments. As you saw in the last lesson there when you were learning about the vertebrae, this is the broad anterior ligament that attaches from one vertebrae to the next. being very broad like this is going to restrict the motion going backwards. So if you were to simply try to bend backwards from a stand and reach your hands back to the floor, doing what the gymnast calls a bridge up, this ligament here is going to prevent too much of that motion. So you might ask yourself, how come circus acrobats can reach backwards, not only put their hands on the floor, but then stick their head between their knees? Everybody's got a different degree of elasticity in those ligaments. And again, they're very tight because they're going to bind everything together. Now you also have a whole collection of muscles, which we're going to talk about later on in the muscle unit here. But this model here gives you a representation of how thick these muscle bands are all around the back. Finally, for the motion, you also have these ligaments that are attaching to the spinous processes all the way up and down the spinal cord. Now, because this is so much thinner than the broad anterior ligament, and they're only attached here on the spinous processes, it's much easier to bend forward and touch your toes. Hence, almost everybody can bend forward and at least touch their shins, and you should be able to reach down and at least get your fingers down to the floor. And if you can't, it's not because this ligament's too tight. It's because your lower back and your muscles in your back of your legs are far too tight. More about that later.